and welcome to the Willowbank Raceway in Queensland for the prestigious 26th running of the Winternationals Drag Racing Classic. Proudly sponsored by Snap-on Tools and Winfield, this event also includes the 7th round of the prestigious Winfield Australian Top Fuel Series. At the Willowbank Raceway in Queensland, the 26th running of the important Winternationals Drag Racing Classic. Kevin Prendergast now joins me in the commentary box. Tucker, probably entitled to favouritism here.
Yes, certainly is. Has qualified very well. The Tucker brothers have utilised 2 or 3 engines in this BMP Tirana this season and have a fairly well sorted combination. The Graham Knoll car, though, that's a brand new combination, one of the late model gas style cars, and I think you'll find it very difficult to drive around Rob Tucker here.
It's been a fabulous weekend, very big crowd, some great racing right throughout qualifying, and you're watching some of the highlights now from the first round. Super Stock Eliminator, a category in drag racing that really is going ahead in leaps and bounds. And we're not far away now from a start in this one. That man is Graham Knoll on screen. Over on the other side of the racetrack in the Castrol GP50 lane is, of course, Rob Tucker. That car has a tendency to rear up at the front upon acceleration, leaving the lights. Both now moving into stage. Keep your eyes on Tucker's car over on the other side of the racetrack. Without a doubt, it will rear dangerously. There he goes, green lights on, and as expected, the front of the car came up well and truly off the ground. But look at the horsepower of Knoll, will you? Rockets by on the outside. It would seem that Tucker had a problem, and Knoll took full advantage of that. A 9.623 second pass at 136 miles per hour. Well, Tucker was disappointing, Kev.
Yes, I'd say they had a gearbox problem there. The Modified Productions cars normally run a 4-speed gearbox, and looking at, he left a good leave off the lights, but obviously some form of mechanical problem, and that left an easy win for the Commodore. On the start line now, Gary Tanner all the way from South Australia. The Winternationals really has become a truly national event. Its elevation in status to the same level of the Australian Nationals and of course the Australian Drag Racing Grand Finals has drawn competitors from all over Australia, and Gary Tanner, the long drive up from Adelaide.
That's very true. This event certainly ranks amongst the top 3 in Australian drag racing. Tanner, closest to your screen, the white Tirana, powered by a very potent engine. You're going to see that. He had handicap conditions there, and Tanner got a great start. There's a problem in the other lane for Enright. He's certainly not going on with the job, and Tanner is going to drive away into the distance here at Willowbank. A commanding victor, 10.03 at 134 miles per hour, and Tanner now advances to the next round.
Yes, Super Stock Eliminator, of course, is handicap conditions on national records relative to the individual classes. As we can see on screen now, the little double D gas car of Jeff Watson. There are so many different types of cars in this eliminator. It's for sedans only, and the cars are equalised in performance by a national record. Jeff Watson's one of the cars that really is one of the likely contenders for a win here. Is one of the quickest in the country in the class, and always very, very tough in Super Stock Eliminator.
Very nice looking race car, well presented, as is the case with most of the Super Stock guys. Jim Wyatt is his competitor over on the other side of the racetrack, doing it in the Castrol GP50 lane. He got a great start. Now the horsepower is unleashed, and they're running fairly close together on the racetrack, but you're going to find Wyatt will get there first as we wait for the time split now, and Wyatt at 10.756 at 126 miles per hour.
Willowbank Raceway track manager Dennis Siramis resigned as national director of ANDRA in 1984. In 1985, Willowbank Raceway opened its doors. Dennis, since 1985, Willowbank has progressed to be one of Australia's finest racetracks, and this weekend really is the icing on the cake.
It really is. This is our first permanent national event, the changing of the Winternationals. We've worked hard on the Winternationals ever since we had it granted to us in 1988 after Surface closed. And we took a few gambles with this meeting. We run it at night in winter time, and quite a few people had some doubts about doing that concept because it's never been done before, but we've got a huge crowd, probably our largest crowd ever, and some excellent racing, and I think it's justified Andrew's decision to elevate the Winternationals to a national event.
One of the policies of the racetrack has been continual improvement of the facilities. Obviously, when we look behind us, the grandstands, the updating of the racetrack has paid off in terms of racer support, and obviously with a huge crowd today, spectator support.
Oh yes, we found that as we improve our facilities, our crowds grow. We've just installed a second grandstand, And it's obvious that because it's just jam-packed now, we've probably got to build a third. So we'll just continue on, and eventually our aim is to have grandstands end-to-end both sides, with perhaps a seating capacity of 30-odd thousand people.
Now, obviously, Queensland is growing. The sport just seems to continue on an upward curve. You see that continuing for a long, long time?
I think so. Queensland itself is subject to a huge population increase, mostly from the south, where people are getting away from the south, coming up where the weather's fine and things are better. And so I think that we're just going to benefit from that influx from people from the south, and we just have to adjust our plan of attack, our marketing and our strategy and our facilities to suit that influx of people.
The sport itself is obviously benefiting from what Willowbank is doing, and obviously the racing that is developing from it. The support from the sponsors and the media seems to be following that curve as well.
There's overall support. I think part of the boom growth in the sport is not only just from Willowbank, it's happening all over the country. Most of it coincided with the opening of Eastern Creek. And a new drag strip at Eastern Creek has really made a magnificent difference. It's made the sport a national sport, and I think it's made people take notice.
Well, Dennis, this has obviously been a great event. We've got a little more racing tonight, but we look forward to the fans throughout Australia seeing more and more of this racing at this level.
Yes, and we'll see you at next year's Winternationals.
Thanks very much, Dennis.
Okay.
Andrew National Director Tony Thornton now joins us. Tony, the elevation of the Winternationals to national level really has done a lot for the event, and obviously is another step up for the sport.
Certainly has, Kevin. For many years we had one event that was the pinnacle of the sport for the year. That was the Nationals, or the Australian National Drag Racing Championships event, as it's known by its full title. We stepped that up with the return of the grand finals to Sydney 2 years ago, and now the sport has developed to the point where we can elevate the Winter Nationals to our third national championship event, with the presentation of the much coveted gold and Christmas tree trophies and the highest level of championship competition for the participants today.
With some 300 entries at this weekend's event, the development of the sport in terms of the participants and the involvement from outside sponsors really seems to be growing.
Over the last 4 years, Kevin, the number of competitors we've had has doubled, in fact a little more than doubled given the figures of the last couple of months. Over that period, the spectators that we're attracting have also increased by about the same amount, and most importantly perhaps over the last 18 months or so, commercial interest and media interest in the sport has blossomed also.
Now, Andrew's adapted to that by forming a marketing arm with a marketing director in place. The benefits of that is obviously beginning to show throughout the marketplace.
It certainly is, Kevin. We undertook first and foremost to spread an awareness of drag racing and build its credibility. We're nearing the completion of that first step, and we'll be following that next year by pursuing major sponsorship for all levels of the sport and all the other things that the drag racers have been looking for many years. I'm really excited at the point we've reached now, and I'm looking forward to the future because the rewards that drag racing so richly deserves aren't too far away, I believe.
Now, last year a survey showed that drag racing was Australia's most watched motorsport. What are the targets for Andrew into the future?
I think to be a little bit conservative, we'd certainly like to sustain and refine what we've already achieved. Some of our facilities are finding that they're reaching the limits of their spectator facilities, and the major ones certainly are working hard to rectify that. The level of return for the racers needs also to step up a little, because it's certainly costing people an awful lot of money to sustain the performance level that we've all reached. All those areas need to be addressed, and the end result of that will be exciting entertainment for all the people who come to watch, a great pastime for the people who take part.
Words of wisdom there from Tony Thornton, who does such a marvellous job administrating drag racing around Australia. And we now move along to the first round of the all-important Top Fuel Dragsters 4,500 horsepower, nitro-burning, simply the elite in drag racing. And Kevin, this event brings together Jim Reed and obviously Terry Sainty.
Yes, it does. Jim Reed has qualified very well in the #1 position. Terry Sainty is in #4 qualifying position. We have 6 cars here for this, the 7th round of the Winfield Australian Top Fuel Series. And Reeds have really stepped up this weekend, and I would quite expect them to be able to really shake the Australian record sometime this evening.
Yes, indeed. Jim Reed and his team have been tireless in the workshop over the past few weeks leading up to this important event, the Snap-on Tools Winfield Winternationals. They've had quite a few problems in recent times, Kevin, with the clutch and also the supercharger on the car. and it hasn't been making Reid all that happy, the ultimate perfectionist. And he now moves into stage against Terry Sainty, a fellow that's starting to go ahead in the sport, but still is a little off Jim Reid's pace.
Yes, Jim Reid has really developed the engine horsepower very, very well, but the secret to these cars, simply because of the horsepower, is getting that traction to the ground. And with these very, very technical clutch systems, if you don't get it right, then you will have problems in the run.
Okay, so Reid now in the lane closest to your screen, doing it for Winfield Racing, Valvoline, O'Brien Aluminium, and that's Sainty, his opponent, on the upper side of the racetrack in the Castrol GP50 lane. Red light on him. For him, Reid leads on his own. Look at the nitro flame standing up, will you? About 2 metres into the night sky here at Willowbank. Sainty coasts through, and Jim Reid a 5.312, a great run.
Yes, a great run for Reid. A 5.30 would make them fairly happy. Terry Sainty obviously had a problem on the start line there. He left long before the tree even started to count down. Automatically disqualification by a red light. So I would suggest again some form of malfunction in the clutch system.
Great now to see on screen Keith Aegis.
Yes, Keith Aegis from Melbourne in the Oz Nitro dragster. They've qualified in 5th position, which is a little low down for them. And of course he'll be up against Graham Cowan.
And Graham Cowan, of course, needs no introduction in Australian drag racing, former national funny car champion, at the helm of the very well-known Rocket Industries organisation, and has put considerable time and money into the development of this magnificent-looking top-fuel dragster. And he's got more sponsorship, Kevin Prendergast, than Alain Prost and Anthony Senna put together.
Yes, well, that's an indication of the strength of the Rocket Industries companies, and it's great to see a brand-new combination back into drag racing for Graham Cowan. This car has not done, it's only done 3 or 4 passes on the track. He ran a good qualifier with a 560, not driving it all the way through the lights. So he'd be very pleased to qualify in number 2 position. The potential for this car is very, very good. It's obviously got a lot of horsepower, but it's a new car for them, so they're learning how to operate it, how to get it down the racetrack, and the second qualifier is a great start for it at its first major meeting.
And of course, Graham Cowan is a welcome inclusion to the top fuel ranks in this country, and certainly will ensure the future of this great division. I've already said the elite in drag racing, not just in this country, but right across the world. So Aegis and Cowan line up side by side. They're into stage now. A little staging duel going on, and it will be great to see just how well Graham Cowan can get this heavy horsepower hitter down the end of the racetrack. A severe clutch explosion at Eastern Creek a couple of weeks ago, and anyone watching the program that saw that will well remember the incident to which I'm referring. So Aegis on the right-hand side of your screen. There they go. The nitro flames stand up. Graham Cowan, far too classy. Oh, the clutch has let go right at the end of the quarter.
Yes, a great run there from Cowan. The car obviously very good off the start line. Big head of flames, but just as he got to about the 1,000-foot mark, it looked like the clutch let go again. A fair bit of debris, but a 5.45, a great run at only 205 mile an hour. That's a good indicator. If the car had kept together, I would suggest that would have been somewhere in the 520s. But Cowan takes the win and moves through into the semi-finals.
Obviously, he'll obtain a fair bit of confidence out of that run. Now we move along to the next pairing in top fuel. That car on screen being driven by Mark Shepherd, the Rapisada Racing entry, and the ever-consistent, ever-reliable Robin Kirby from Melbourne.
Yes, Robin Kirby really has been Mr. Consistent. He's still currently second in this Winfield Australian Top Fuel Series. Mark Shepherd has been behind the wheel of the Rapisada Dragster for this summer season. There seems to be some problems with the car. It's not firing as evenly as it should do. Traditionally, if you have a look at the nitro flames, they sort of work their way down the pipes as they come out. But Mark Shepherd's in the burnout. It's said to be dead on one side of the engine, so they may have some problems. Robin Kirby, of course, so consistent, he's likely to really be able to get around Mark Shepherd at this point.
Kirby running under the Kirby Racing banner. And this sport, and for that matter, all forms of motorsport, need people like Robin Kirby. Very consistent, always there, travels right around the country, throws a lot of support behind his sport, and most times will get down the other end of the racetrack, and that's very important. Shepherd, as Kevin has alluded to, may have some problems here. You can see that there, Kevin.
Yes, it certainly has done. It looks like it's dead on one side, so I'd expect there's probably going to be a sole over here from Robin Kirby, who'll move to the semi-finals.
Yes, Shepherd takes no further part. Kirby gets the business done and rockets down the end of the quarter mile here at Willowbank Raceway. Once again, Robin Kirby, the Victorian, demonstrating a lot of consistency. A 6:05 at 228 miles per hour. Well, certainly Graham Cowan on the comeback trail will be a happy man. Kevin Prendergast is now with him trackside.
Number 2 qualifier in round 7 of the Winfield Australian Top Fuel Championships, Graham Cowan. Graham, first round a 5:45, an improved time but some trouble up the top end.
Yeah, the car left the line like a rocket ship. I think we ran 9.935 60-foot time, which indicated we were on a 5.0 or a 5.10 pass, and unfortunately we had a clutch malfunction, and the clutch came out of the car around 1,000 foot. We shut the car off 4.5 seconds, and we still managed to run a 5:45. We're full of enthusiasm. Unfortunately, we haven't got the time or the parts to put the car back together tonight, but I can assure you we'll find a problem, and we'll be back with eight cylinders firing.
Yes, the 60-foot time was the best I think we've had in Australia so far. There was an excellent 60-footer, and obviously an indication of the car's potential.
Yeah, well, I honestly believe this car's got 4-second potential, and come summer, we'll be ready for it. You know, and that 5:45 pass of mine was a personal best, by the way. There's been a funny car guy. My previous best was a 5:51 in the United States. So we've achieved 2 things here. We're on a personal best and the best 60-foot time in Australia. So we didn't waste our time coming here, that's for sure.
Well, after a couple of laps in the dragster, how did you find the transition?
Well, I'm still a bit dazzled by the power of this thing. I mean, you touch the throttle, man, and all of a sudden your head wants to stay on the starting line. The car wants to take off. But it's fun.
Well, it's great to see you back in drag racing, and we look forward to many more very fast performances.
Yeah, our crew does as well. Thank you.
And the drag racing continues at Willowbank Raceway. Top alcohol now, round 1, one of the most popular eliminators on the national drag racing scene. Going through the burnout there is Queensland's Gary Phillips, and that on screen is, of course, Steve Harker in the funny car.
Yes, this will be a very, very important confrontation for both competitors. Gary Phillips on screen at the moment is the defending champion in the Australian Series and #1 qualifier. Steve Harker in the funny car is the current leader in the 1993 series, so he's looking to defend his points lead. But of course, the most important aspect of this weekend's event is the likelihood of one of the competitors being the first ever top alcohol car to run a 5-second time.
Yes, indeed, that's very much what it's all about this weekend, and Gary Phillips certainly has the package to be able to achieve that goal. So Harker on the other side of the racetrack, and we're not far away from the start. Green lights on any tick of the clock. Should be a magnificent pairing, this one. Harker on the right-hand side of your screen. Gary Phillips has red-lighted. Phillips has red-lighted, so Harker only needs to stroll to the other end of the racetrack and obviously transfer to the next round. A 6:08 at 224.2 miles per hour.
Yes, Gary Phillips would be very, very upset about that. A 6:08 to a 6:09 is a good indication of the closeness of racing in top alcohol, but the red light means that Steve Harker advances to the semi-finals.
Kevin, now 2 of the best presented race cars in any form of motorsport in this country. That is Steve Reed's machine on screen. In the other side of the racetrack, or on the other side of the racetrack, is John Noonan in the Top Gun dragster.
Yes, a great pairing once again. Jim and Stephen Reed have always been the leading competitors in top alcohol in Australia. This car has run as quick as 6:02, so it's one of the quickest cars in the country, and he really will be looking to advance here over the Top Gun dragster.
Stephen Reed has shown plenty of intestinal fortitude this year, involved in a terrible crash not that long ago, and now has the car rebuilt and set to go once more. Noonan on the other side of the racetrack, a pretty fierce competitor, and this will go right down to the wire. The rev is now building. Crowd rises one. Top alcohol action about to unfold, and they're gone. A very even start. Noonan's front of that car got right up off the ground, and the horsepower of Stephen Reed's car absolutely evident with a 6:19 at 227 miles per hour, and it keeps on coming now, Kevin. Stan Tyndall against the Englishman, the former European champion.
Yes, Stephen Reed, the only competitor outside America ever to have run a 5-second pass in top alcohol. He has really worked very, very hard to race in Australia this summer. He's found adaptation to the Australian conditions to be fairly difficult, but he's looking for a win here at the Winternationals.
Yes, indeed, he describes the domestic motor racing here in Australia, top alcohol competition, as being as tough, if not tougher, than anywhere else in the world. And he's had a lot of problems with tyre shape, Kev.
Yes, he has. The horsepower that these cars are producing is a fairly unique in the power band, and he's had clutch problems and fuel problems which have resulted in tyre shake. And in fact, as a result of that, he's in fact broken 3 transmission cases, which is virtually unheard of these days in top alcohol racing.
Steve Reed, very resilient, always gets the job done, and it invariably ends up in the final of top alcohol competition. So Tyndall closest to our camera, Revs building top alcohol dragsters. Green light on, Reed got an absolutely blistering start. Tyndall now starting to certainly gather momentum. They run side by side towards the top end, very close indeed. Reed gets the upper hand, a 6.15.
A great race once again, a 6.15 over a very much improving Stan Tyndall with a 6.17. This is really turning out to be some great performances from top alcohol.
People watching right around Australia may be confused by the plain white funny car that you saw affecting the burnout a couple of seconds ago. That is in fact Jeff Burnett, who normally runs the altered machine, in fact was credited as having the fastest altered in the world, has now chosen to go for the funny car configuration, and Kevy's up against one of the nation's best here.
Yes, the Alan Dobson driven Oldsmobile Achiever, sponsored by Castrol, really is one of the best presented and toughest teams in top alcohol racing. The performance of this car, the crew setup, etc. is equal to anything in the world, and they really have done extremely well this year.
That man is Jeff Burnett, a gutsy competitor. He knows he's got his hands full here. A real challenge on the quarter mile as he squares up beside Alan Dobson all the way from Western Australia. That man on screen assisting Dobson is Greg Gower, the car owner, and boy oh boy doesn't he love his drag racing. Just listen to the horsepower and the revs of these machines. Dobson closest to your camera, doing it for Castrol. A start not far away now. There they go. Simultaneous green light, even start. Look at Alan Dobson, will you? Too much class, too much horsepower, and absolutely sprints away.
Well, look at the time, a 6:01 at 229 mile an hour. That's a good indicator. Those guys have got the horsepower, the track conditions are there, and I'd say the 5-second time is definitely under threat later on tonight.
Another fabulous eliminator now, Pro Stock sedan, going ahead in leaps and bounds in this country, and we're going to see a couple of the nation's best. First up, round 1, Pro Stock sedan, Tony Wedlock. There he is, a great-looking piece of machinery, and goes just as hard as it looks good. On the other side of the racetrack is Bruce Leak in a fairly new car.
Yes, the quality of the Pro Stock field here at the Winternational is exceptional. Some 10 cars qualifying for the 8-car field. Tony Wedlock really has done extremely well in this year's competition. He's battling for the lead in the series, so this race once again is very, very important. Bruce Leak from Canberra. This is a new car, one of the later cars coming out of the USA, but he really is developing the performance of it.
Carburetted vehicles, the Pro Stock sedans, similar in specifications to touring cars in road racing terms. Wedlock got a great start. He left Leak standing at the lights. Great reaction time, and Wedlock is really making his intentions well and truly clear from the outset. An 8.24 and a very good run by him. Now one of the other heavy hitters in national Pro Stock racing, Joe Polito.
Yes, Joe campaigns the only Ford currently running in Australian Pro Stock racing, and he's up against the West Australian Michael Marriott. Michael, having travelled across from Perth to race at the Nitro Championships and here at the Winternationals, he's going to find it fairly difficult here. Polito has always had a lot of horsepower and is reasonably good on his reaction times, and so it'll be a difficult one for Marriott to be able to drive around.
So Michael Marriott and obviously his opponent on this occasion, Joe Polito from Sydney, line up side by side. There's a quarter mile of bitumen between right where they are, the starting lights, and obviously the end of the racetrack. Should be a beauty, this one. Polito enjoys a strong following right around the country. One of the most popular men in Pro Stock racing. Away they go. Marriott got a good start. So too did Polito. You'll find that Polito will draw beside him and race away with this one. And that's indeed the way it's worked out. An 8.19 at 168 miles per hour.
Yes, an excellent time there for Polito, but he was very, very slow on the lights, and Marriott, a good reaction time, but just didn't have the horsepower.
Well, what more can be said? As he goes through the burnout, he's made it his own. Victor Bray, super stock eliminator, and Peter Samet is his competitor or opponent here, and Samet hails from Melbourne in one of the most technically advanced race cars in Australian drag racing.
Well, we're in round 2, and this really is a tough matchup for both cars. Victor Bray running in AA gas on a record of 7:05, and he's up against the double D gas car